I think their side of the family doesn't believe me, and I just want to clear it up for everyone. Clear it up for everyone, not just the people online making crazy actions.
When children vanish without a trace, they leave behind questions that haunt us. Questions that keep investigators awake at night. Questions that leave communities forever changed. On May 2, 2025, Lilly and Jack Sullivan, ages 6 and 4, disappeared from their rural Nova Scotia home. No signs of forced entry, no security footage, no witnesses, just 2 children there, one moment, gone the next. But this isn't just another missing children case. The bizarre behavior of their mother, Malia Brooks Murray, and stepfather Daniel Martel has transformed this tragedy into something far more disturbing. Their actions in the days and weeks following the disappearance have raised red flags that cannot and should not be ignored. Before I dive deeper into this haunting case, take a moment to comment where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these children's stories reach more people, and subscribing ensures you never miss a case that deserves attention. The Sullivan family lived in a modest home on Gairloch Road in Lansdowne Station, Pictou County, a rural area of Nova Scotia characterized by dense woods, steep embankments, and isolation. Their nearest neighbors lived just far enough away that screams would go unheard, privacy that would later become problematic for investigators. The family consisted of mother Malia Brooks Murray, stepfather Daniel Martel, 6-year-old Lilly, 4-year-old Jack, and a 16-month-old baby. By all outward appearances, they were an ordinary family navigating the challenges of rural life and a blended household. What stands out immediately are the days leading up to the disappearance. The children were kept home from school for 3 consecutive days. April 30th was a professional development day for teachers, but May 1st and 2nd were allegedly due to Lilly having a cough. This timing has raised questions about whether keeping the children home was truly for medical reasons or something else entirely. The last confirmed public sighting of Lilly and Jack was on May 1st, when they were seen with family members. No one outside the household would see them again. The seemingly normal household presented no obvious warning signs to neighbors or family friends. Yet, within 24 hours, everything would change irrevocably. May 2nd, 2025, began like any other day in the Sullivan household, or so Daniel Martel would later claim. According to his account, around 10 a.m., the children were playing inside the house. Lilly reportedly moved between rooms several times while Jack was heard in the kitchen. Then silence descended. Daniel's explanation hinged on what investigators would later call the silent sliding door theory, the suggestion that the children had managed to open the back sliding door and wander outside without making a sound, without anyone noticing. A door that, notably, made no noise when opened or closed. Here's where the timeline becomes critically important. Despite allegedly noticing the children's absence sometime after 10 a.m., the RCMP wasn't notified until they issued a public alert at 12:25 p.m. This 2-hour gap has never been adequately explained by either parent. When authorities arrived, they found no evidence of forced entry, no signs of struggle, and no indications of abduction. Yet the rural location, surrounded by dense forest and hazardous terrain, made the prospect of 2 young children simply wandering off equally troubling. Children this young rarely travel far without leaving evidence of their passage. Daniel's first statements to authorities already contained an element that would become a pattern: speculation about abduction, despite police stating there was no evidence supporting this theory. Malia initially appeared distraught but composed, a demeanor that would later draw scrutiny from behavioral analysts. The RCMP took a cautious approach, issuing a vulnerable missing persons advisory for Pictou County. They didn't classify it as an abduction, but mobilized resources typically associated with such cases, a contradiction that reflected the unusual circumstances surrounding the children's disappearance. By 4:55 p.m., the RCMP provided their first update, confirming the search was ongoing and asking the public to avoid the area. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour, the chances of finding Lilly and Jack alive diminished in the challenging terrain of rural Nova Scotia. The search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan evolved into one of the largest operations in recent Nova Scotia history. By May 3rd, over 100 volunteers had joined ground search and rescue teams. Supported by dogs, drones, and helicopters, a missing persons alert was extended to neighboring counties as hope drove the community to action. "We're going to find them," one volunteer told local media. "Children this young can't have gone far." That optimism would soon be tested. On May 4th, the search expanded to include 160 searchers, but heavy rain complicated efforts. It was during this phase that Daniel Martel first suggested monitoring the New Brunswick border and nearby airports, again pressing the abduction theory despite no evidence supporting it. A potential breakthrough came on May 5th when searchers discovered what appeared to be a footprint. The search intensified in that area, with drones equipped with thermal imaging deployed during nighttime hours. But the lead ultimately proved inconclusive. After 5 exhaustive days, on May 7th, the RCMP announced they were scaling back the ground search. The grim reality was setting in. Given the conditions and lack of confirmed sightings, authorities expressed doubts that the children could still be alive if they had indeed wandered into the wilderness. Between May 8th and 9th, RCMP underwater teams searched nearby bodies of water without finding evidence. A makeshift memorial began forming at the Stellarton RCMP detachment, a community's expression of dwindling hope. By May 13th, investigators reported following up on 180 public tips and conducting 35 formal interviews. Yet each lead seemed to evaporate upon close examination. The lack of physical evidence was becoming its own clue. A final coordinated search effort took place between May 31st and June 1st, focusing on areas near where the bootprint had been found earlier. Poor weather-limited helicopter use, though drones provided some assistance. On June 1st, exhausted, physically and emotionally, searchers suspended operations due to a continued absence of new evidence. Search experts later noted significant deficiencies in the operation. Delays in deploying advanced technology, insufficient coordination between volunteer and professional teams, and a failure to adequately secure potential evidence areas early in the process. From the earliest moments of the investigation, both parents' behavior raised subtle but troubling questions among experienced investigators. Malia Brooks Murray made an emotional public plea for her children's return on May 3rd, stating, "I want them home. I want to hold them." The appeal, described by some media outlets as haunting, should have resonated as the authentic desperation of a mother. Yet something felt off. Behavioral analysts noted inconsistencies in Malia's emotional presentation, moments of appropriate distress interspersed with periods of unusual calm and composure. Her eyes, according to one expert, seemed to be performing grief rather than experiencing it. This assessment, while subjective, would gain credibility as her behavior evolved in the coming days. Daniel Martel's conduct raised different concerns. Despite police statements that there was no evidence of abduction, Daniel immediately and repeatedly speculated about this possibility in media interviews. On May 4th, just 2 days after the disappearance, he suggested monitoring airports and provincial borders, an unusual focus for a parent whose children might simply have wandered away. Their story about supervision also contained troubling inconsistencies. Initially, they claimed the children were playing outside unsupervised. Later, this changed to being unaware the children had left the house until it became quiet, a significant discrepancy that was never reconciled. Perhaps most telling was Daniel's insistence that the children must have exited through the sliding back door without anyone hearing. Family members later contradicted this, stating that while the oldest child had opened doors before, Quentin never had. "That's what's crazy about everything," one relative told reporters. "I've never seen him open a door." In press appearances, Daniel's demeanor appeared unusually controlled. While Malaya cycled between emotional extremes, Daniel maintained a composed, almost rehearsed presentation. Behavioral experts noted his tendency to provide excessive details about irrelevant matters while being vague about critical timeline questions. What are your thoughts about the parents' behavior so far? Your perspective in the comments might highlight something investigators missed. The investigation into Lilly and Jack's disappearance was hampered by a series of critical procedural failures that may have irreparably damaged the chances of resolution. Most damaging was the delayed mobilization of specialized units. The Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit should have been immediately involved in any case involving missing children. Instead, precious hours passed before their expertise was brought to bear. Hours when evidence could have been secured, witnesses interviewed while memories were fresh, and digital information preserved. The Truth Verification Unit, responsible for polygraph examinations, became involved early but with troubling opacity. Daniel Martel underwent a polygraph test and publicly claimed to have passed, yet no official confirmation of these results was ever provided by authorities. This lack of transparency fed public skepticism about the investigation's thoroughness. Even more concerning was the apparent absence of polygraph testing for Malaya. This discrepancy has never been adequately explained by investigators and raises questions about potential gender bias in the investigation process. Digital forensic services faced similar delays in examining crucial electronic evidence. In an era where smartphones track location data and messaging history, the failure to immediately secure and analyze the parents' devices represented a significant investigative lapse. GPS trails, deleted messages, and Bluetooth connection data could have clarified the timeline, yet by the time this analysis began, critical digital evidence may have been altered or lost. The K-9 unit's deployment timing presented another problem. Search dogs failed to detect any scent trail leading from the house, presenting investigators with a troubling dilemma. Either the children never left the house or someone had meticulously eliminated evidence of their passage. The delayed K-9 deployment, coming hours after the initial report, meant that fleeting scent markers may have dissipated. Underwater recovery efforts were similarly compromised by technological limitations. The absence of advanced autonomous drones and thermal imaging sensors meant that searches of nearby water bodies were less comprehensive than they could have been. In deep or murky water, traditional search methods can miss critical evidence. Forensic experts have criticized these failures as representing a fundamental misunderstanding of the golden hour principle in missing persons cases, the critical first period when evidence is freshest and leads most actionable. Each delay exponentially decreased the likelihood of finding Lilly and Jack alive or determining their fate with certainty. As days turned to weeks, both parents' behavior evolved in ways that deepened investigators' suspicions. Malaya's initial participation in search efforts and media appeals abruptly ceased. She withdrew from public view, leaving the family home to stay with relatives, a decision that might seem understandable given the stress. Except for one troubling detail, she blocked Daniel on social media platforms shortly after leaving. This digital severing of ties raised immediate questions. Why would a mother whose children were missing cut communication with her partner during such a crisis? When asked about this decision, Malaya offered no clear explanation, further fueling speculation about potential discord or knowledge she might be concealing. Daniel's behavior took a different but equally concerning turn. he voluntarily submitted to a polygraph test and publicly declared his cooperation with investigators, actions that behavioral analysts describe as performative innocence. He repeatedly emphasized his willingness to help while simultaneously controlling the narrative through careful media management. Investigative behavioral specialists identified several critical red flags in Daniel's communications. His use of past tense when referring to the children, Lily was always running around rather than Lily is always running around, suggested a subconscious acknowledgement of their absence as permanent rather than temporary. His demeanor in interviews struck many as overly controlled, focusing on projecting an image of cooperation rather than displaying the raw emotional distress typical of parents in genuine crisis. His statements about the children's disappearance contained contradictions about timeline, supervision, and his activities that morning, inconsistencies that multiplied with each retelling. Perhaps most disturbing was his early and persistent focus on an abduction narrative, despite investigators finding no evidence supporting this theory. This fixation appeared designed to direct attention away from the home environment. Malia's behavioral red flags were different, but equally concerning. Her mechanical, emotionless statements during limited media appearances contrasted sharply with the expected emotional presentation of a mother whose children were missing. Her decision to physically remove herself from the search area, something almost unheard of among parents of missing children, suggested either overwhelming guilt or knowledge that the search would be futile. Her apparent lack of urgency in the initial hours of the disappearance, as reported by first responders, contradicted the natural panic expected in such circumstances. Forensic psychologists analyzing the case noted that the parents' behaviors displayed classic patterns of distancing and controlling, psychological mechanisms often employed by individuals attempting to manage high-stress situations where deception plays a central role. Most troubling was the evolving pattern of their relationship deterioration during a time when most parents of missing children cling to each other for support. The sudden fracturing of their partnership suggested internal knowledge or suspicions that were never publicly articulated. By mid-May, a subtle but significant shift occurred in the investigation's direction. What began as a missing persons case increasingly resembled a homicide investigation, though authorities carefully avoided using this terminology in public statements. The transition was marked by the growing focus on Malia and Daniel as potential suspects rather than grieving parents. Investigators began re-examining their statements, looking for inconsistencies and contradictions that might reveal deception. Their digital records, including phone data and social media activity, came under intensified scrutiny. Perhaps most telling was the unusual lack of family support for the parents. In most missing children cases, extended family rallies around the parents, providing emotional support and assistance with media management. The conspicuous absence of this support structure suggested that even those closest to Malia and Daniel harbored doubts about their accounts. The Criminal Analysis Unit's assessment proved pivotal in this shift. Their specialized mapping of behavioral inconsistencies revealed patterns of deception that could no longer be attributed to stress or grief alone. The unit's methodical approach, correlating statement analysis with digital evidence and witness testimonies, painted an increasingly troubling picture of what might have occurred on May 2nd. Several key pieces of evidence altered the direction of the investigation. The complete absence of any scent trail from the K-9 units challenged the fundamental premise that the children had wandered away. Digital forensic analysis revealed discrepancies in the parents' reported movements and communications during the critical morning hours. Witness statements from neighbors and family members contradicted aspects of the timeline provided by both Malia and Daniel. The lack of any confirmed sightings of the children after May 1st, despite extensive media coverage and community awareness. As the investigation progressed, investigators' approach evolved from supportive to skeptical. Questions became more pointed, surveillance more evident, and the psychological pressure on both parents intensified. This tactical shift, from treating them as victims to potential perpetrators, reflected the growing consensus among investigators that the original narrative of children wandering off was highly implausible. By June, though never officially declared, the investigation had effectively transformed into a homicide inquiry. The search for living children had become a search for answers about their fate. And increasingly, those answers seemed linked to the very people who should have protected them. The public response to Lilly and Jack's disappearance evolved dramatically as the case unfolded. Initial waves of sympathy and community mobilization gave way to growing suspicion and division. In the first days, the community rallied with remarkable solidarity. Volunteers by the hundreds joined search efforts. Local businesses provided supplies and support, and social media campaigns spread awareness of the missing children. Vigils were held and prayers offered, a community united in hope and purpose. This unified front began to fracture as media coverage shifted from straightforward reporting to more nuanced analysis of the case's troubling aspects. Local news outlets initially focused on the search efforts and the parents' emotional appeals. However, as inconsistencies emerged, reporting became increasingly critical. National media attention amplified this scrutiny. Investigative reporters began highlighting the delayed reporting, the contradictory statements, and the unusual behavior of both parents. Television interviews with body language experts and criminal psychologists dissected every gesture, expression, and word choice from Malaya and Daniel's limited public appearances. Social media transformed from a tool for awareness into a forum for amateur investigation and speculation. Facebook groups dedicated to analyzing the case accumulated thousands of members who meticulously examined every photo, statement, and timeline discrepancy. Some of these online communities became echo chambers for increasingly extreme theories, while others maintained a more measured approach to examining the evidence. The parents' digital footprint became subject to intense public scrutiny. Past social media posts, relationship status changes, and online activity patterns were analyzed for clues, often without context or expertise. Daniel's early social media posts expressing confidence that the children would be found alive and well were later contrasted with his police statements using past tense references, fueling online speculation. As public opinion shifted, the community itself became divided. Some maintained that rushing to judgment was premature and potentially harmful to the investigation. Others became convinced of parental involvement and expressed growing frustration with what they perceived as investigative delays in making arrests. This division manifested in troubling ways. Confrontations at community meetings, heated exchanges on social media, and even unauthorized civilian investigations that sometimes interfered with official efforts. The case became a projection screen for community anxieties, personal biases, and broader concerns about child safety and protection. Media coverage eventually settled into a pattern of periodic updates when new information emerged, always circling back to the central question that continued to haunt the case. How could two children vanish without a trace? And what did their parents really know? Today, the investigation into Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance remains officially active, but has grown cold. No bodies have been recovered, no definitive evidence of their fate has emerged, and no charges have been filed against any suspects. The case exists in the limbo of unresolved tragedies, neither concluded nor advancing. The current investigative status is classified as ongoing with periodic review, meaning that while active pursuit of new leads has diminished, the case file remains open for re-examination when new information emerges or investigative techniques advance. Malia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell have separated, Malia relocated to another province and has maintained near-complete media silence. Daniel remains in Nova Scotia. Expert analysis of the available evidence points to several possible scenarios, none of them offering the closure that the community and the children deserve. Forensic psychologists specializing in familial crimes suggest the most likely scenario involves harm coming to the children within the home environment, followed by concealment of evidence. They point to the parents' behavior patterns as consistent with those observed in other cases where parents were responsible for their children's disappearance. Dr. Eleanor Marsh, a behavioral analyst who has reviewed the case, notes, "The combination of delayed reporting, inconsistent statements, unusual emotional presentation, and relationship deterioration creates a behavioral fingerprint we've unfortunately seen before in cases where parents were ultimately found responsible." Criminal investigative experts have identified the case as an example of how procedural delays can irreparably damage chances for resolution. The failure to immediately secure electronic devices, conduct timely forensic examinations of the home, and coordinate specialized investigative units created information gaps that may never be filled. Comparing this case to similar situations where parental behavior proved revealing. In cases like that of Susan Smith, who initially claimed her children had been abducted before eventually confessing to their murder, investigators noted similar patterns of controlled emotional presentation and narrative management. Conversely, in cases where innocent parents were wrongfully suspected, such as the parents of Elizabeth Smart, their behavior typically showed consistent emotional distress and unwavering focus on finding their child rather than controlling the narrative. The Sullivan case demonstrates behavioral patterns more aligned with the former than the latter, according to multiple experts who have reviewed the available information. Questions that continue to haunt investigators include, if the children did wander away, why did extensive searches with advanced technology fail to find any trace of them? Why did K-9 units detect no scent trail leading from the home? What explains the parents' rapid relationship deterioration immediately following the disappearance? Why did Malia withdraw from search efforts and media engagement so quickly? How did Daniel know specific details about the children's disappearance that seemed to presuppose knowledge he shouldn't have had? If you've found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to Last Seen Stories and hit the notification bell to support more in-depth investigations like this one. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan represents not just a tragedy for two innocent children, but a profound failure of both personal responsibility and investigative procedure. The behavioral red flags exhibited by both parents form a pattern that cannot and should not be dismissed as merely the unpredictable reactions of grieving parents. Malia's emotional detachment, rapid withdrawal from search efforts, and decision to distance herself physically and digitally from both the investigation and her partner stand in stark contrast to typical parental responses in missing children cases. Her mechanical statements, lack of persistent advocacy for finding her children, and absence from public appeals after the initial days suggest knowledge or involvement that remains officially unconfirmed. Daniel's controlling narrative, inconsistent statements, and unusual focus on abduction theories without supporting evidence similarly point to deception rather than genuine concern. His use of past tense references to the children, overly detailed accounts of irrelevant matters, and performative cooperation with authorities align with patterns seen in cases where parents were ultimately found responsible for harm to their children. The investigation itself suffered from critical procedural failures that may have permanently compromised the search for truth. The delayed deployment of specialized investigative units, inadequate digital forensic analysis, and poor coordination between various law enforcement teams created gaps through which evidence and opportunity slipped away. The first 48 hours in any missing persons case are crucial. a window when evidence is freshest, memories most accurate, and digital footprints most intact. In the Sullivan case, this critical period was marked by delays, inconsistencies, and missed opportunities that continue to haunt the investigation. Justice for Lilly and Jack would mean not just accountability for whoever is responsible for their disappearance, but also systemic improvements in how missing children cases are handled. Their case should serve as a catalyst for enhanced training, improved interdepartmental coordination, and more sophisticated behavioral analysis in the earliest stages of such investigations. As we continue to follow this case and others like it, we must remember that behind the analyses and theories are two innocent children who deserved protection, advocacy, and justice. Their story reminds us that the most dangerous threats sometimes lurk not in the shadows of strange forests, but in the familiar spaces we call home. Thank you for joining me in this analysis. If you found this video informative, please like and share it with others interested in true crime. Your support helps shed light on cases that might otherwise be forgotten.